to another episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, your go-to source for the latest industry trends and strategies to help you level up your M&A practice. As always, I am your host, Nick Olsen, Managing Director of Cornerstone International Alliance, the only international alliance of M&A firms who focus on the lower middle market. Here we bring in guests who are true masters of their crafts, are experienced, knowledgeable, and gracious enough to share how they've succeeded in the world of M&A. Today's guest is I'm really excited about. He is a member of Cornerstone International Alliance. He's been in the M&A space for over 22 years, been a business owner himself. He has played hockey for over 55 years and still currently plays. He is a big integral part of the number one graduate entrepreneurship program in the country for the last 4 years, top 3 in the last 6. That is the program at Rice University, which I know he's very excited about and proud of. Today's guest, he is with Exit Advisors out of Houston, Texas. Danto. Welcome to the show. Appreciate you taking the time out today, and really excited
Thanks,
about
Nick. Great to be here.
Great
to be here.
And the
Thank
topic at hand, which we'll dive into in a couple minutes. But first, want to just learn more about you and what got you into the M&A industry.
Yeah, sure, Nick. I'll try to kind of encapsulate 40 years in, you give me here maybe 5 minutes. But I've done it enough. So, I started out, as a print distributor. I distributed printing in envelopes. I actually started out of my apartment. I'll date myself. It was the mid 80s in Houston. And I was working installing computer systems for the NCR Corporation. And we were changing manual systems over to automated systems. And one of the things that we needed were business forms, invoices, checks, multi-part forms that ran through the old sprocket-fed computers, and they had to go in an envelope. And I was responsible when the system went live for making sure that we had all the reports set up and we had all the forms that we needed and everything was ready to go. And I ran into a bottleneck on envelopes of all things. My local envelope manufacturer was, they're having some trouble getting product out the door, kind of going through a death spiral. Oil was about single digits back then, so Houston's very cyclical. Where I'm at, we're in a down cycle. So I needed to make sure we got these envelopes for us. And he had a trade magazine. He said, hey, I can get these envelopes from other trade manufacturers. They don't have sales reps. And we signed on. We started the classic envelope. And then we eventually, his company went out of business, and we brought on 3 of their sales reps, and we started selling envelopes in Houston through these manufacturers to big companies. I mean, big, well-known companies, some of the big oil companies, banks, everything that they had. We started to do the same thing with business forms and printing. We were a distributor. I quit my job. My roommate was with Price Waterhouse. He came on board as a CPA, and then we started distributing envelopes and printer products. We had an opportunity pretty early on to buy one of our manufacturing companies. We had become the biggest distributor for them. We bought the company, the relationship we had at the bank, and went on a tear. I guess we bought about 14, 15 printing companies. We grew through acquisitions. We expanded nationally through catalog sales, and then along the way, we became a vendor for actually big well-known beer company. Can I announce names on here? So it was for Anheuser-Busch, so we became a preferred vendor for them, and we started to sell business forms to their distributors nationwide. And we did the same thing for Miller, Coors, and others. So we started to develop these niche industries we'd go after, and we came up with catalogs. Back in the day, we mailed out catalogs, and then we supplied different industries, dry cleaners, travel agencies.
Right.
We were killing so many trees back then in the 80s and 90s, right? And we just grew, and then a really unique thing happened. I was at the National Beer Wholesalers Conference in Las Vegas, and I saw one of our forms with a circle and a line through it. It said, "No more forms, ask us how." And I went up and I saw the first kind of electronic keypad, and it said, "We're going to replace all this paper." And I said, maybe it's time for me to get out. That was writing on the wall. So I had been approached by a lot of investment bankers and stuff in our industry, and I called one that was doing most of the deals, and he said, "Yeah, you got a good company. You're unique. We had none of the common risks that I think you'd find in a printing company, right? We had a lot of diversification, some big names, all that stuff. So we got a good offer and sold the company. Just before I'd sold the company, I had gone back to Rice. I got my MBA at Rice. A little bit later on, I went to a weekend program. I got my MBA, and One of my classmates came up with a startup idea, and I said, "That's a great idea." I backed her idea with some capital that I had, and Rice asked us to come back and start telling the story. So we told the story. They turned it into a case. I started to pick up a class here and there, and came on, and then so post acquisition, after I sold the company, I started to teach and share the knowledge that I had built up. I'm very fortunate to be in the right place. Rice was committed to entrepreneurship, and like you said, over the last 20 years that I've been involved, we've built the program into the #1 entrepreneurship program in the country, graduate school, through a lot of different support, capital that we have, ideas, technology that comes out. But Rice is committed to entrepreneurship. And then people started to reach out to me. They said, "Hey, you've done this for a long time. You have an MBA from a well-known university," and people started to reach out to kind of help them through the process. So I've helped them through the acquisition process. I just hung a shingle. And started to advise people through the process. I became a certified valuation analyst. Started to do valuation, and I've just kind of been fascinated with the whole M&A process. I learned it informally and organically in my 20s, and then I came back to and learned the kind of formal side of it. Later when I got my MBA, and now I teach it. And I've taught it. So I teach our classes there. I teach classes on startup, and I also teach classes on buying a small business. So it's called Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, and I teach a class on valuation, valuing small
Very
businesses.
cool.
So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share a little bit
Yeah,
of the
just a
knowledge
little bit.
that I've
That's a
gained
lot of it.
over
So
40 years. So
very storied career
so
thus far, and
yeah,
I think
yeah,
it's just amazing that you're part of the #1 entrepreneurship program in the country, and as an entrepreneur yourself, and really we're working with entrepreneurs, helping them sell their businesses and things like that. And so it's I think it's just every day is a new day. But we're here to talk about a topic that, in my opinion, and everything that I've heard being in this industry, I don't hear a lot of conversations about. You and I have talked recently about it, and I think, from what you've told me, it's almost like a light bulb goes off. Like, yeah, wow, like that could be a game changer if you consider,
yeah,
these kinds of things. And so here we're here to talk about, risk and perceived risk. And so let's talk about the risk and the fear to start out. Um, you got a couple of stories which I think are cool, so I'll let you kind of dive in and tell those stories. But yeah,
yeah.
risk and fear. What do you think is relevant for us to learn about today with risk and fear?
Yeah, I guess when you think about the formal side of evaluation, right? We hear discount rate, capitalization rates, and everything. Well, that's the risk, that's the uncertainty, and the more uncertain something is, the more you discount it back, the lower your value is. It's a real simple concept to get. One example that I have is the very first company I ever bought. I mean, I was scared to death. I was 26 years old. We bought this company, and it was probably the best due diligence that I ever did because it was the first time I ever did it. But we looked at everything, I mean, inside and out, and then we made sure one of the sellers stayed on board, and we kept a third of the purchase price. We held it back, and we paid it out over time. I was scared to death, right? I had this incredible amount of fear coming in here. I didn't know anything about manufacturing. So we tried to mitigate this risk, and this is what buyers do all the time. Now, when I was 26 and I did it for the first time, it was
Hmm.
just gut. I was just scared to death. I couldn't fail. We put everything on the line pretty much to go out and buy this company and get in the manufacturing business. So all the risks that you'd look at when you do a formal evaluation, now I did back there at 26. Now I can talk about it. I can teach it in a classroom and everything. But we went through everything. Um, just kind of by the gut. And then ultimately we said, if we're going to do this transaction, we want the seller to stay on board to minimize
Hmm.
this risk. And what we look at it from a formal standpoint, right? From an academic standpoint, you say, okay, we have to put an academic process or maybe a theory behind this. So the theory is this, which it's called the prospect theory. And basically, what we do as humans, we overemphasize the downside risk more than we value the upside gain. And these two behavioral economists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, they won a Nobel Peace Prize for figuring this out. And you asked me, and anytime anyone asks me to talk about one thing, if I could say one thing to people, what would it be? It would be this. It's the thing that I wish I knew then, but I know now, is how our fear drives our uh, decisions, our investing decisions. And I was around in 1987, Black Monday, in 2001, and 2008. And at that time was pulling back. We all pulled back, but that was the time to really be buying, be stepping in, buying, because this fear drove us on the downside. And then on the opposite side, these huge swings, right? In Houston, in Texas, when oil hits $100 a barrel, we think it's going to be 150. It normally ends up being below 50, right? Because we've got this fear and this greed that kind of drives us. But this fear and this perception of risk, we overemphasize it on the downside. We really have a hard time looking at it objectively. So I use a couple examples, and one of them is that if I ask you, what do you think has happened in the crime rate in America since 1990, violent crime? What would you think initially?
I would say it's getting worse.
It's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's actually improved by 50%. Violent crime in America is down over 50%. But we don't think that because of what we see in TV and our perception of it, right? And I use another example of a bungee cord jump. Most people are scared to bungee cord jump, but bungee cord jumping, if you look at it statistically, it's pretty safe. And all my engineers in the classroom and engineers out there say, they can say, yeah, it's an engineered thrill, right? I mean, there's only a few points of failure, but you're 5 times more likely to die just getting up and going to work every day.
That's crazy.
But you don't get up with this fear every morning and say, I'm scared to go to work, like you would if you stood up, in an 800-foot bungee cord jump. So
right.
This carries over into all of our actions, and it really is prevalent in M&A. It creates a lot of interesting dichotomies out there between the buyer and the seller. And when you understand that and you start to think it through, I think you're right. It's most people have an aha moment as they start to realize this.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because like I said, in your normal activities, like you said, getting up out of bed, going to work, like that fear isn't necessarily there until you kind of bring that fear up yourself, or external things that come into your daily life. But when you're working on a deal, that fear is present all over the place, from the buyer side, from you as an M&A advisor, from your client's perspective. And so how does that influence all the players in an M&A potential deal?
So what it does is, basically, from the buyer side, the buyer is that bungee cord jumper, right? Risk is asymmetric. If I'm going to buy your business, I don't know what you know, right? If there's any skeletons, problems, issues, challenges. But from the outside, I'm going to assume the worst because of this natural human tendency that we have. So as a buyer, and I look at your business, I'm going to assume the worst. So all these, any potential risk that you have in the business, right? And we'll walk through some of these risks. I'm going to emphasize that on the downside, where you're not going to worry about it as much, right? I like to drive cars with a lot of miles on them. I happen to have an Explorer that has 200,000 miles on it. Every time I get in there and start it, I've never had a problem, right? But if you look at that car to buy it, you're going to think about, oh my God, 200,000 miles, what's going on? Is it taking care of it? Is the problem? Is it going to break down? Everything. But to me, so we have a big difference. So you've look kind of at a common bid and ask, like in stocks. I don't see the same risk that you see. So when you value any cash flow, you're valuing it based on the risk, right? And so until we really take care of these downside risks, and we get them out and we're clear on them, the buyer is going to really hold back on what their offer will be in a price. Now, as an objective third-party valuation analyst, I have to take the fear out of it, and I have to look at it objectively. So when I come in and evaluate a company, and you look at the company-specific risk or external risk, market risk, you have to try to value them objectively. But it's really hard to do for a buyer to do that.
Do you think that 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 fear of or that risk is something that they're subconsciously doing or consciously thinking about?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's certainly subconscious, but it's manifested in a low ball offer, right? It's manufactured. So
Yeah.
there's only a few things we can do with risk, right? What can we do? We ignore it. We walk away. Say it's too risky. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to bungee cord jump. It's too risky.
Mhm.
We can mitigate it. We can come in there and find some ways that we can mitigate it. Maybe through insurance. Maybe through a seller note. Maybe through uh, keeping the owner involved somehow in the company. You can do that, or
Mhm.
we can accept it. So when risk becomes okay, we'll go out and we'll accept that. Right. Every day we get in the car and we drive, we have a risk of something very unfortunate. We could die, right? But we accept that risk.
Mhm.
So the key is when you look at improving value, right, is to really mitigate those common risks that are associated with buying a small company. And the more you mitigate those risks, the easier it is to accept, and the higher offer, the higher value I'm willing to give. So in the classroom, we talk about valuation in a bell curve, right? And we talk about an industry average. So if an industry average is a four, let's say a four multiple, right? Well, that means that's just a middle point. Some companies are going to be for the same exact amount of revenue and cash flows. Some companies may have a 2x valuation, some may have a 5x valuation, right? And really,
Mhm.
it's the risk as those are mitigated, as those risks are mitigated. That's where we see value improve, and I'll walk through a few of those
Mhm.
for you in a bit.
Yeah, that'd be. I mean, um, how does you know? What are some of those common risks that you're referencing? That impact a
Yeah,
business owner.
the biggest risk of buying any small business is what happens when the owner leaves, right? So is if the owner can
Mhm.
just say that they're not the day to day, they're not the engine uh, that drives the business, right? That the business can survive without them. And what's the evidence of that? How often have you been on vacation? How have you been gone? What are your processes? What are your systems? What are your controls? Do you use something like a entrepreneur's operating system, an EOS system? Do you have a good solid management team that's tied to the business, right? They're not going to get up and walk away. Are there maybe non-competes in place? Are there incentives for the management team? Are they willing to stay on? Is the owner willing to stay on? Right? Um, External factors can be, the competition in the area. What's the competition? How are you different than the competition? How do you stand out from the competition? What are your Google reviews, your Yelp reviews, right? I mean, one of the biggest things that we see, if you have poor Google reviews, poor online reviews, it's really hard to get over that. And that's a really big devaluer in a business in today's market, right? The reputation in the marketplace, right? Um,
Mhm.
your financials, are they clean? Have you had a quality of earnings done? Are they audited? Can I trust and verify your financials, right? Um, the history of the company, been involved in any lawsuits. All these risks are evaluated, certainly in due diligence on a very formal basis, but ahead of time before that offer's made, all this is put together. Um, you know, Customer
Mhm.
concentration, customer turnover, customer churn. How quickly are you going through turning your customers over versus your competitors? And then there's industry ratios and stuff that you can compare and look at as well. So this is what a buyer is going to do before they write a big check. And investors are going to do it. We just got done with it was a relatively smaller transaction, about $6 million, but it was private equity. They spent $700,000 on due diligence, digging into all this stuff, right? And at the end of the day, the seller had, I mean, they were very clean, they were great, and they passed with flying colors, and they had a really relative high valuation in terms of multiples relative to the industry, but they deserved it, right? They deserved it because they had taken a lot of this risk out. Where
Mhm.
if a company, on the other hand, hadn't, they don't deserve that high of a valuation. And it really comes down
Mhm.
again to a lot of this risk. And then the problem is once there's a perceived risk problem in there, it's like, oh, I'm gonna back off, and then we have this wider, kind of bid ask, this wider spread that happens um, in there, and that's a.
How do you get over like
Mhm.
what are some strategies that you've used, in your history to kind of perceived risk can be it can be that it can be perceived or it can be real, but what strategy have you used to help the buyer get over the quote unquote perceived risk to kind of flip it on the other
Yeah,
side and
you,
make
you
it
do
a
make it a
maybe a
positive.
positive?
I mean, absolutely. You can take the same exact thing because once you take care of this downside risk, once I'm comfortable on this downside, I'll start looking at growth. I'll start looking at opportunities. I'll start looking at really probably objectively what I should as an investor, right? As an investor. Um, but
Hmm.
I will only do that once I'm okay that I'm just not gonna. This isn't gonna go off the cliff. I'm gonna lose 50%. Right. So once I'm confident with that, I will start looking and I will start paying attention more to these growth opportunities, what I can do to the business, how I can improve it. So really,
Hmm.
what I've done and what my mission has become in working with entrepreneurs and educating entrepreneurs is say, hey, look, you're going to go through due diligence at the end of the day. Why not be ready for it now? And if you really want to stand out in the marketplace, I'm going to, you can ask me any question. Come in, see my facility, ask me any questions. It's transparent. I'm going to give you confidence. It's kind of like if you were buying a house and that house had meticulous records and when was the air conditioning filters changed and this is everything we've put in this house in the last 20 years and we've taken care of. We've taken care of the roof. We've maintained everything, right? And so that way when somebody comes in to buy it, they see it and they have this confidence. Or think about it in terms of a car, right? A car that had meticulous records and the oil was changed, transmission fluid changed. Here's every time I've been to the mechanic over the years, and then you compare it to one that doesn't. I'm certainly going to give a higher price for the one that had been well maintained and the records are there. Right? Even if there was a problem, I say, hey, look, I changed the transmission out 4 years ago or something, but I'm transparent with it, right? And the problem you see is when
Right.
certainly if there's a problem that's there that hasn't been taken care of before that company has gone to market. It's no different than if I put a house on the market and I haven't replaced old air conditioner or something. And I learned this in buying printing companies. We bought printing companies and we had to come in and evaluate all the equipment. All the equipment that was in there, the people that were in there, and if it was well maintained, um, then we'd just make intuitively you make a higher offer, and formally you make a higher offer after you get through a formal evaluation of all these factors.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, whether you're consciously thinking about risk or not, like the more upside, like you said, the more we're willing to probably pay for it. And so, kind of on the opposite side, Al, when you're advising your client on the risk, because I think you kind of hit it nail on the head. Like, if you can get out in front of this and be upfront and honest about it, or maybe even making improvements before you go to market to make sure that those risks are lower. I got to imagine in your normal practice, like that's a conversation you regularly have with your clients, and then how do you go about working with them to kind of bring the skeletons out of the closet earlier,
Yeah,
improving
there's a
on all
couple
those
things there,
things
Nick.
before
Number
you go to
one,
market?
that's kind of become my passion over the years. I mean, I won't take a client on until we do a thorough evaluation. Again, we look under the hood. We just look under the hood. We look at everything, and then from evaluation standpoint, again, we may mitigate this risk and say maybe it's too late in the game to make some of these changes, right? But when I teach entrepreneurs early
Hmm.
on, I say, look, start now, right? Start with these things. Get it set up. Have processes. Have an onboarding process for your employees. You know, um, make sure that you're looking good online. That you're not the entire business. All these kind of things that we're gonna look at in due diligence and try to get the business owners to do that ahead of time. Then, in essence, what they can do, they can sell their business to themselves. They have a business that can run and operate independently of them. The
Hmm.
time that they choose to exit the business is up to them, or it's not. Oh, I have to do it. I have to get out of here. So
Right.
I've worked with some people. They've run their business into their 80s because they see, they're out fishing and they're doing everything they want, and they got a good management team and they're well incentivized. And if they ever want to sell the business, they're certainly going to be able to sell the business, right, at any time. But in essence, they've been able to do that to themselves, right? So
You just mentioned another thing. From your perspective, you have some risk too in this whole process of, when you're taking on a client, you want to be successful not only for your own, purposes, but also for them and for the new buyer that's coming through. So, what do you do kind of from a risk analysis when you look at bringing on a client? You personally, like, what are you looking at from a risk perspective?
yeah,
To
we
make
go
sure
through
that
the
you know you
standard.
can be
We
successful.
do evaluation first and foremost, and we use that as we get paid for it. We'll do evaluation, formal evaluation, and we say, look, we want to look under the hood. We want to be able to really do a thorough inspection of the company to see and go through it all, and then we kind of come back to the seller with almost like a gap analysis. Is here's where we're at, here's where we'd like to get to, and again, what we see, and we fight it all the time as M&A professionals. Well, this business could do this. What's the future of the business? What I tell every single one of my clients or students, I say, look, someone's buying the business today, and this is a little bit different maybe than a theoretical valuation using future discounted cash flows, in that when that buyer takes it over, they're going to take over the risk, the responsibility for running and growing their company. So they're not going to pay you up front for it. It's like if I have a house that needs repairs, once I repair the roof and repair the paint it and get it in good shape, put a new carpet, it's worth maybe 20% more, but I'm not going to sell it for 20% more today. Yeah, we often have our sellers come up to us and say, well, they could do this, the new owner could do this and could do that, could do all this stuff, and say, well, if they do it, shouldn't they get the reward on it for taking that risk and the responsibility to do it? And if you want to do it and you want to increase your value 50% more, then you need to go out there and do it. Now, if you're happy with your value today, I think we can get you this number, but you have to know that someone's going to come in there and say, if you have this going on or that going on. We certainly want to make sure that there's no deal killer risks in there, and that could be customer concentration. It could be the owner so involved in the business that he has all the relationships and everything, and there could be a potential deal killer risk in there that we'll look at. But typically we'll take a deep dive into the valuation and all these factors that really can increase or decrease valuation. Say, hey, here's where you're at. This is what the market's paying right now. So obviously, some industries pay a higher multiple, a higher relative valuation. But if you look at the reason why, even like we talk about SaaS, software as a service, 100% recurring revenue, it's because the risk is out of it. It's more predictable. So ultimately, recurring, predictable earnings are going to get a higher relative valuation. So, I learned that. I mean, the best lesson
definitely the recurring revenue
I ever had.
I mean,
what's the best lesson you ever had? I was at a hockey game, Houston Aeros hockey game, and the president of the local EO Entrepreneurs Organization chapter that I was a member of had sold his business, and it was a alarm processing. They monitored alarms and everything, and he sold it for a lot. I said, "What's the one piece of advice that you give me?" He said, "Find recurring revenue." I said, "I own a printing company. How do I get recurring revenue?" He said, "You need to figure out a way." And that's when we started to kind of contract with these software companies that would install a system into into like a facility, into a Budweiser distributor or something, or a dry cleaner. We picked up that. I paid bonuses for newsletters, for magazines, anything that had a recurring flavor to it. Right? We even had a printing contract. You could have an annual printing contract with us, and we would only increase our price 75% of what the cost of paper. And so we kind of guaranteed. And then when I sold it, we had an incredibly high valuation. And Russell Val, who I was at the hockey game with, he was the first person I called when my wire transfer hit. I said, "Remember that advice you gave me years ago?" I did it in the printing business. He was the very first person I called when it happened. And so I kind of had set that wheels in motion, several years before I sold the business. And the business didn't depend on me. I was able to walk away from it. So that recurring revenue all the time. Anything you can do to minimize risk, to make it predictable,
on recurring revenue?
Valuation decreases when uncertainty goes up and risk goes up. So with the core, anything that we can do with our clients to do any type of recurring revenue, if they can do that, decrease the uncertainty, show that customers stay there year in and year out. That's what increases value. So yeah, we'll do that.
So utilizing risk. I mean, maybe not necessarily risk score, but reducing risk essentially can increase the value. And as an M&A advisor, you gotta maybe look at it differently to look at it that way. And some might not. But I think if you look at it, because you kind of hit the nail on the head in the beginning, you're more,
Exactly.
you're gonna react, probably stronger to the losing of $50 as opposed to gaining 40. And so if you look at it from that perspective too, when you're, advising your clients and helping them understand, well, if this risk is here, you're going to get less money. They're going to react more to that and be like, well, if you do these
the
things,
seller
you're
is
going to
the
get
glass
more.
is
Like,
half full,
am I
and the
correct?
buyer is the glass is 3/4 empty. And that risk that you see, when you do that and say, can you put like a system in there, like an EOS system, right? A process that that shows it. Can you just show somehow that you're not involved in the business day? So we literally have a checklist, and I'm happy to. Most valuation analysts go through. I don't want to dig too deeply into valuation theory and everything, but this company-specific risk, right? So this is really what triggers the value from a low to a high, are all these company-specific risks, and there's standard company-specific risks that are out there. And as you check the box on all these, you significantly decrease risk and increase value. I have a case study that we do at Rice, and the seller, the business owner, talks to my class. He's my best speaker. He'll be speaking this weekend at my weekend classes. He had a closet company. They installed closets. He was a process engineer, had an engineering undergraduate degree from Northwestern, and a master's in engineering from Northwestern, an MBA from Northwestern, I'm sorry. But he came in, he said, I want my business to be a process from the time a lead comes in to the time money hits the bank. I have nothing to do. Zero. Just processing people. And he was able to do this. And when we went to market with him, a small manufacturing company, one of my valuation analysts said, I think we should value it here. I said, no, increase the value of 40%, because he's taking all these risks away that you're going to find in most small businesses. And when we went to market with it, he had just an incredible amount of interest, and he ultimately sold it for well over what we even listed the business for. Somebody came in and recognized that factor. He said, man, you've totally turned this into a machine. He said, yeah. And I guess why haven't you expanded to Dallas or San Antonio or Austin? He was in Houston because it was a lifestyle business for him. He lived 3 months of the year in Colorado. And he said, I didn't want to, but if you want to, you can. And the guy said, okay, I'll pay you $100,000 cash more than you have it listed for. We'll take everyone else out of the game. He said, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So he bought the company, and this is what the buyer has done now. He's expanded to their own business, and it's been successful. But, and I tell my students, I say, if he can remove all these risks from a closet manufacturing company, right, you can find a way to do it in yours, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been amazing. And Al, just, if anyone was to, watch one part of this episode, like, I think this could be it for the M&A advisors out there. If you could just, off the top of your head, you might not catch them all, but what are those risks that you want to check the boxes off to reduce for your client? If you can name as many of them as you can. Like I said, if there's just one segment that you look at in this whole episode, like, this would be it.
Yeah, obviously it starts out with the owner's involvement, the management team, right? Customer concentration, length of customers, customer turnover, customer churn, your reputation in the marketplace, your financials. Are they clean? Are they audited? Are they done according to GAAP? Are you going to get through quality of earnings evaluation? Your contracts, are your contracts assumable? Huge. I had a deal that did not get done because the contracts were not assumable, and it was a $12 million deal because in due diligence the buyer said, these contracts aren't assumable. So until we see that all your supplier vendor, that we can assume them, we can take them over. And he did not want them to talk to the clients, right? Because he was kind of an alternative to, he was a big strategic buyer, right? But contracts, agreement, processes, what do you look like online? Do you have a good online presence? That's the first place anyone's going to look at in today's world. Right. They're going to Google. They're going to see, you have any lawsuits pop up. Once you talk about a bad first date,
Oh, no doubt. You're going to Google it.
That's like, it's like knowing your daughter's going out on a date and you Google the person she's dating and you see that, they have a warrant out for them or something, right? I mean, so these all these type of things. Processes are really, really important. I mean, that, somebody wants to buy a workplace, workforce in place, a process in place. So, what's your sales funnel look like? What's your pipeline look like? How do you convert sales to orders? What percent do you convert sales to orders? This closet company, he had his whole pipeline documented for years. This is the number of proposals we gave. This is the number that converted. So when someone came in and said, "Hey, you don't have any recurring revenue," they said, "Yeah, but these are the number of leads that we get. Here's where our leads come from. These are the numbers that we convert." So, a lot of it's common sense, but it's hard to do. It's like going on a diet and saying, "Okay, what do I need to do to lose weight?" Well, you need to exercise more, eat a little less, get in the gym. Well, it's hard to do, and it's but at the end of the day, you end up, you're 70 pounds overweight and sort of being, an ideal, target weight. And same thing, I think, when it comes to, business, when it comes time to sell, you can be in pretty bad shape or you can be in great shape. And when you hit the market, you're either going to get a higher valuation or maybe a lower valuation, and all these things that you can do. So that's a handful of them. I'm happy to send a list of them. If anyone ever has worked with a valuation analyst, they'll go through these common risks and everything. But I think the key takeaway is just to remember that for all these risks that you leave on the table, you're going to pay for it in a much, much lower valuation. And once you kind of get that downside kind of comfortable, right, and the trust is there, then you're going to get more on the upside.
Yeah. That's amazing, Al. That's great. That's really good stuff. So I really appreciate you joining us today. And this is going to be, I think, one of our best episodes because there's a lot of great takeaways, but just a different perspective on how to look at
Thanks, Nick. I
helping
appreciate
your
everything
clients,
you're doing.
how to look at the buyer's perspective as they're looking at risk. And so really, really appreciate you joining us today. Yeah, I appreciate that. And how can I guess where can
just Al at
exitadvisors.com
or Al Danto at rice.edu. And just I'm happy to share. I've got a couple books that I wrote, an ebook, stuff like that we use in the classroom. Happy to share, happy to help out, happy to send stuff. So whatever anybody needs.
Yeah. And Al, that's one of the, we talk about, Cornerstone International Alliance and just having really good people. You are one of those really good people, willing to collaborate, willing to share, willing to help others out. And so I really appreciate that and really appreciate you and everything that you do for your students, everything you do for your clients, everything you do for Cornerstone International Alliance. So thank you. And that's all we have for today's episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. Go check out our episodes at cornerstoneia.com/podcast. All of our episodes are right there. Do Al and myself a favor and like, share, comment, view, send to anybody who might find this interesting. And thank you for helping us out, Al. Thank you for joining today.